With over 12,300 logistics providers employing over 150,000 people, proximity to the fastest growing and most efficient seaport in the country, and the world's busiest airport, Atlanta is positioned to be the supply chain capital of the world. In this episode of Supply Chain Now Radio, Ben Harris, Director of Supply Chain and Advanced Manufacturing for the Metro Atlanta Chamber, discusses things the Chamber is doing to support growth of #SupplyChainCity.
Supply Chain Now Radio would like to welcome Ben Harris to the show. Ben serves as Director of Supply Chain and Advanced Manufacturing with the Metro Atlanta Chamber. Good morning again, Ben.
Good morning, Scott. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Now, I bet you are worn out from all of your world travels here lately.
I have been traveling a good bit recently. Let's see. Started actually in New York to start the year. We had a big New York Stock Exchange event there. I'll tell you a little more about that in just a minute. Actually went back to New York this past week for the NRF show. Their NRF, which is the National Retail Federation, had their big show.
Now, on that note, I was reading about that. Yeah. I thought retail's big show was Christmas. But
it is, but I guess because of peak season, they had to pick January just after that. And what a nice, warm place to pick, New York in January. And then right after that show, No West for the Weary flew straight to Detroit for the Detroit Auto Show and Automotive News conference that they have there as well.
Another warm place.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very chilly.
What does the Chamber do in these kind of events? Like, what's your role there, and what are you trying to accomplish?
It kind of goes back to what the Chamber does as a whole as far as their mission. So we do a lot when it comes to site location, when it comes to recruiting companies, and also growing companies in Georgia. So when we go out and leave the state, that is something we want to do from a recruitment standpoint. So a lot of companies that are there are either exhibiting or speaking at the event. And it gives us a chance to get in front of those companies and show that Georgia is a leader from a supply chain standpoint.
Now, what's something that you're doing that at the end of the day, you guys are high-fiving and not at the bar at the end when the day's over?
The sexy stuff, I would say definitely from a location standpoint. Just recently, we actually had an announcement from PSA, which is a French automotive company, actually, who just announced their North America headquarters here, that they picked Atlanta, which is extremely exciting, especially
big news.
Yeah, exactly. On the we've had Mercedes-Benz, who've actually they're actually right outside our window right now.
Street.
That's correct. They're doing their North America headquarters here, and of course Porsche, which is down by the airport here in Atlanta as well. So, and I think the biggest thing to note here is these are automotive jobs for one, but they're really technology jobs more so is what they are. So it requires a different from a workforce standpoint. Definitely requires a different set of skills for us to do that. And I think Atlanta, from a supply chain and technology, from that skills set standpoint, is poised for growth in that area.
As we land each of these businesses, I believe the Metro Atlanta team gets awarded a car of their choice from these companies. Is that right?
Wouldn't that be nice?
I got to negotiate that.
You're working that in your comp package.
Yeah, right. No, actually, it's funny. Porsche actually does have what's called their passport program, which is a subscription-based program, which is actually pretty cool if you can afford it. Which is you can actually switch out cars, when as needed. Basically, you never have to have the same car. So I think that's where really automotive is going these days. Also, I think
subscription model.
Absolutely, especially with ride sharing continuing to grow. The real competition out there is not owning a car at all. To either, maybe just use ride sharing as a whole or, renting a car like a Zipcar or one of those services for folks as they continue to move to the city. I think I heard a stat out there at the auto show that 80% of the U.S. population will live in a city or a mega city basically by 2030.
So, yeah. Well, so let's dive into some of the reasons why Metro Atlanta is such a world-class supply chain city. We were chatting in the lobby a little bit. You mentioned technology earlier. What a great city to have as many technology players as we do here in Atlanta.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing what's going on here from a tech standpoint. I mean, you've got over 20 different innovation centers. These are private industry innovation centers here at Atlanta. I'll name a few. You've got Boeing, who has one, Chick-fil-A, Coca-Cola, First Data, Honeywell, with a great announcement. They have an innovation center here as well. KPMG, Novellus, another automotive company there, and GM as well. So some
few names we recognize.
Some pretty big names, obviously, from a headquarters and just the Fortune 500 here. So I think from building on that, we've talked about doing maybe a central supply chain type innovation center. And I think we've had initial discussions about what that would look like. A lot of these companies are already doing that, but what would it look like for all these companies to have a central place to do that? And again, from an incubation and kind of startup standpoint, we've got over 40 plus kind of collaborative workspaces here in Atlanta as well. I think we actually just heard an announcement from WeWork just now. They opened their second location now in Atlanta just now. ATDC, Atlanta Tech Village, Venture Lab at Georgia Tech, just to name a few. There's definitely from a startup standpoint in tech jobs here, it's insane the amount of explosive growth we have here.
And you mentioned Georgia Tech, another big factor when we talk talent. Atlanta's home to 4 of the top 25 supply chain institutions, of course, led by Georgia Tech. But there's great things going on at programs like Clayton State University down in Mora, Georgia. They've got in fact, CSCMP, I know, will be down on campus with a career fair show, I believe.
February 28th.
Mm-hmm. They've got a very vibrant
12 universities, a lot of different companies coming down to interview folks. John Mescatero is the professor down there. It's actually a board member for education on CSCMP.
Well, a lot of good things going on in Mora, Georgia, with that 4-year supply chain management program that they've been building and growing.
Are you seeing that more in more universities, some supply chain, actual curriculum that's built around supply chain?
Absolutely. I couldn't tell you exactly what that percentage is in growth, but absolutely. I think
it's 2 million %.
2 million.
Scientific figure. But, speaking, it's a great question, Lee, because I think from a certification standpoint, from a CSCMP and APICS and others that offer certifications, because of the growth in university programs, they've had to kind of factor that into the demand for certification. So You're seeing a lot of these organizations, create partnerships with universities to offer their certifications as a complement to the 4-year degree.
Right.
So it's all a good thing for the supply chain space for sure, because it not only does it equip new supply chain practitioners with the skills and the best practices and, of course, education, but it gives them the education side and the practical side, right?
Now, Ben, is this something that when you're talking to different companies around the country or around the world, and you talk about the workforce, the fact that the universities work so well with industry and to kind of collaborate to create this kind of, it seems like they're really working together to solve the industry's problems by giving them students that come equipped with some skills that they really need, not just hypothetically need.
No, absolutely. I think the university system has their own economic development partners that we work very closely with to do that. And so we always involve them, because I think from a workforce standpoint, that is the most important thing from a business attraction standpoint that Atlanta has.
So that when you're having these conversations with companies in other areas, that's one of the first questions they're asking you?
That's exactly what they always talk about. Pipeline. It's the number one thing. If we talk about Amazon, so we were talking about that earlier in the segment, I think that's the number one thing that they want to know about is, can they get the talent here? And I think undoubtedly the answer is yes.
And I saw that specifically on Amazon that there were certain markets that were eliminated because Amazon didn't feel that they had the workforce that they needed.
Correct. I'm sure they'll, a lot of people will come to a city, depending on, they might be outside the city to, for if a company does get recruited somewhere, but the most important thing is having that pipeline of talent. And I think that really starts also the technical colleges, the university system, which is so important, but also at younger ages as well.
Right.
We talk about STEM education. I think the Georgia Chamber is this morning on NPR was talking about another initiative that's from STEM to STEAM, actually.
Right.
So science, technology.
And the arts.
Exactly. Adding arts to the equation as well, because the need for creativity with technology, those are going to be the jobs that, for Industry 4.0 and Internet of Things, as those become so important, those are the kind of jobs that companies are going to be looking for.
And Georgia's well positioned now with all this film and gaming and music that's happening in this.
And
absolutely. Scott?
So, of course, with your world travels, New York and Detroit, you've got a really big trip on February 16th as you come to the joint CSCMP Atlanta Roundtable and APICS Atlanta event, right? Your biggest, surely your biggest presentation, right? But kidding aside, we are really looking forward to your presentation on #SupplyChainCity, which we'll talk more about in just a second. Atlanta's comprehensive ecosystem. So we've already tackled a lot of the reasons why Atlanta is such a great world-class supply chain city, but touch on maybe some of what additional information or perspective you'll share on February 16th.
Yes, we always talk about supply chain city as kind of the marketing arm, or at least a hashtag that I'd like for Atlantans and to use to get the word out around Atlanta from a supply chain hub standpoint. We've got 16 of the top 25 Fortune 500s run a supply chain out of Atlanta. 12 of the top 20 supply chain software companies have a presence in Atlanta. So we have a great ecosystem here in Atlanta. But it's hard to show that on a global scale. So the Supply Chain City initiative, what I'm going to be talking about in my talk there, will be around what Supply Chain City is and how can we get as a community, how can we push that initiative forward to show that there's companies out there who want to join Atlanta, want to open up an innovation center, want to open up a distribution center, manufacturing center, whatever that may be. That Atlanta is the place to do that.
And then that presentation is open to all CSCMP members, APIX members, and non-members. The public's invited. We're really appreciative of the Metro Atlanta Chamber hosting that event from 11:30 to 1:30 on Friday, February 16th.
You've got the registration out, Scott, and so does CSCMP as well.
Awesome. That's right.
Yeah, the registration went out yesterday for CSCMP members to join on that 16th.
Terrific. And we expect a great crowd. We're using your biggest boardroom. I think room for 2,000 people, I believe.
We've always got room for more, too.
No, it's make room.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've been in that space for about a year now, actually, a little over a year. So 191 Peachtree, if you ever have an event that you want to host there, obviously, just like the one that we're doing with APIX and CSCMP, that we do that stuff all the time. So happy to have you.
Appreciate that. So speaking of the hashtag Supply Chain City, let's talk a little bit more about where that started, and obviously that marketing aspect to it. We want to show the world our credentials, be proud of the great city we live in. But talk a little bit more about where that started.
Sure. So it was really an initiative that's kind of the nexus of three things coming together here. It's the talent here in Atlanta, the ecosystem and infrastructure here in Atlanta, and also kind of the anchor companies that are already here, which we talked about some of the innovation centers and things like that. But I think from an infrastructure standpoint, from an ecosystem standpoint, you've got a workforce here. We talked about the university system between Georgia Tech, KSU, Clark Atlanta, Morehouse, Georgia State, the University of Georgia, of course.
Go Dogs.
That's right, go Dogs. Some wonderful talent that is coming to Atlanta, obviously. And then you've got the physical infrastructure as well. You've got the largest airport in the world here in Atlanta, the busiest airport in the world, I should say.
110 million passengers served in 2016. Holy cow.
That sounds about right. That's amazing.
And you probably took 5 million of those flights.
Yeah, right. Right. I don't travel that much, but as far as railroads, we have the most extensive rail network in the Southeast as well. From a port standpoint, the Georgia Ports Authority has that's the fourth largest port in the United States from a container throughput standpoint, and actually one of the fastest growing still as well. So just a great mix there from an infrastructure standpoint. We've also got a couple shows that are coming up. Modex, I don't know if you've heard about Modex, but that's coming up in April. It's called the largest supply chain show on earth. It's actually what it's called there.
Combined with the Georgia Logistics Summit as well.
Right.
That's correct. The Georgia Logistics Summit.
April 9th through the 12th, I believe. That's correct.
Co-located this year, which is a big win for Atlanta.
Yeah, very exciting. The program from Georgia Logistics Summit that they put on is actually going to be part of the program officially with Modex this year. It's going to be co-located there. So really exciting. Great name recognition for Georgia. Over 30,000 logistics and supply chain professionals will be in Atlanta at that time. So definitely mark your calendars for that. And it's actually a free show. So please, feel free to sign up when you have a minute.
Yeah. Registration is also open, and you can sign up. If you go to the georgia.org site, which is a catch-all for the economic development site for the state of Georgia, you can register for the Georgia Logistics Summit, which will be April 9th through the 11th, again, co-located with the big Modex show, which is supposed to bring in 30,000 folks.
That's right.
Which is great for the city. Well, Ben, kind of in conclusion of this segment with you today, again, I'm going to take these last few minutes and challenge our listeners and challenge us in the room. What else can we do to really promote all the great things that Atlanta has to offer?
I'm glad you asked. I think as far as, understanding the logistics ecosystem here in Atlanta. I hope I've done some of that today, but also evangelizing that message and getting it out there, I think, is really important to the community. Us creating an environment, a healthy environment for business, that's going to be the biggest thing is how do we make Atlanta as attractive as possible to businesses? So I would encourage you to start using the hashtag supplychaincity out there for Atlanta, and also the second hashtag of supplychainATL as well, all one word there. I'm going to be using those a lot to get the word out as I do tweets and other social media. And I'm sure when we get the word out about this podcast, we will be using that as well. So start using that. Get plugged in the community. Always feel free to contact myself if you have any questions about it, if you want me to speak somewhere. And yeah, I think we've got a lot of things going well for Atlanta, and very excited about the future here in Atlanta when it comes to supply chain and logistics.
Ben, can you share a little bit to the businesses out there that are listening to this? What do you hear from these companies in other markets about wanting to come to Atlanta? They wish that Atlanta would provide that. Maybe these companies can say, you know what, if that's a pain that these people are having, then maybe we can work on that.
I'd say the number one thing that we get asked more than anything is from a technology standpoint, and what we hit on earlier about workforce. Do we have the pipeline, the workforce to fill those jobs? And I do think we do, absolutely here. We've made a lot of advancements, from a technical college standpoint, from early childhood education as well, to fill those jobs. And I think that's what companies want to know about more than anything. They also want to talk about some of our unfair advantages that we have. I think is just from a location standpoint. We're right in the middle of where 80% of the U.S. population is within a 2-hour drive. It's 2-day drive. So that's big for us when it comes to being able to service a population that continues to grow, coming to the South and also to the East Coast as well.
So basically, our tagline is Atlanta, we have it all.
Yeah.
Right? T-shirts.
I like to think that, yes.
We have 80% of it.
There you go.
Well, Ben, thanks again for what you're doing for the city, being a fantastic ambassador, and of course, the collaboration you're doing with the industry associations here in town. We appreciate that too. So thanks for being on the program.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Appreciate it.